Elizabeth Luther says, I think she's in the district, she said, that we did 48% last night here is kick-ass and with a positive message, too. The women in our district are the ground team. It's been amazing.
Yeah, a couple things on that. There's been some talk about how Trump only won this by 1.5 percentage points last November, so therefore this should be an easy race for Democrats to win with all of the energy and the money that they have. But having been to that district, I can tell you that is very misleading. There were an enormous number of people in that district who were disgusted by Trump and were willing to send a message about that. But it doesn't mean that on a congressional level, on midterms or in special elections, that this is a competitive district. Like I said, Tom Price won it by 24. They've been consistently winning it by those margins since the 1970s. Talking to Democrats on the ground there, before the kind of resistance sort of bubbling up, they didn't even feel socially comfortable describing themselves as Democrats. It was socially unacceptable. At one polling place that I was at yesterday, one supporter of Bob Gray, who was the kind of the Trump guy in the race, told this group of Ossoff women that they're not real Americans because they're Democrats. Democrats aren't Americans, and that's the kind of attitude that prevails in a lot of that district. On her second point, it seemed to me that about 98% of the energy down in that district was being driven by Democratic and independent women. It was extraordinary when you'd go to the polling places, and if you had 10 people out waving signs, 9 of them or 10 of them were women. And that's on the ground, but also at the organizing meetings, doing all the hard work of getting folks out. So to get to this 49% actually is an impressive move. Like it's a swing of 10 20 points. So whether that can hold in June depends a lot on what happens between now and then.
I just have a comment on what you just said. I've spent a lot of time in the South too. Tim Tyson, the author of The Blood of Emmett Till and Blood Done Sign My Name, he said when he was growing up, a Democrat was kind of like a polar bear. You've seen a picture of one, you know they exist, yes, but you've never seen one in real life.
Yeah. Somebody that I talked to analogized it to the LGBT movement's success recently, where at some point, when people started coming out more, people realized, oh, that's my cousin, that's my uncle, that's my aunt. And it kind of eroded some of the prejudice and the hostility, and it allowed for the rapid conversion of the American public in such a short period of time on the issue. And they said in some ways it's similar. It's like, oh, wow, my uncle's a Democrat, maybe maybe my uncle's a liberal, my aunt's a progressive, my cousin's one. Well, I didn't. All these people didn't know that each other were liberals, and now they're forming all of these groups that are meeting up, and they're taking on different issues like redistricting, for instance. They tried to run redistricting through in the middle of the night a couple weeks ago, and groups came together and stopped it. So, now that this has been uncorked, it's not going to be easy to put it back into the bottle.
I'd rather be Jon Ossoff right now than Karen Handel. You look at this district, a heavily gerrymandered district. Tom Price won by 23 points 5 months ago. And here you have, and you, as you know, Joe, just a few weeks ago they were saying Democrat can't get over 42, 43% of the vote. He got 48. The other 3 Democrats got roughly a point. So he's already at 49% of the vote.
I don't know. If I had to pick at this very moment, it's almost a toss-up which one I'd rather be. I'd probably pick Handel if I really was forced to be one of them or the other, but then I would be Karen Handel. And have managed to blow up a cancer research organization. Congratulations.
Is it gone? Really?
No, I mean it's still around, but man, it took a beating.
Karen Handel, she's far to the right. She's someone who said, I don't support the Affordable Care Act. When that vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act comes up, she's on the side of the Tea Party. I think 17% of the American public supports the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. So she's got some explaining to do to women about why she wouldn't fund breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood.
So yeah, there is that point that like Ossoff has spent the first 2 months running anodyne ads about himself. now he's going to turn his fire on Handel. And so the thinking might be that you could maybe drive down her numbers a little bit with some ugly attack ads around the district. And he's absolutely right that it is a very gerrymandered district. There was a state legislator who said publicly, "We didn't draw these boundaries so that Jon Ossoff could sit in it."
Jeez.
He said, "We didn't draw these boundaries so that Hank Johnson's old staffer could sit in it."
Yeah, I mean, speaking of rigging elections,
that is a very specific and explicit rigging of an election. And in the meantime, they've been trying to redraw the state house and state senate districts because they keep becoming more competitive. But you're only supposed to redistrict every 10 years.
Right.
They've been trying to do it after every election when it gets too close.
One last thing from Perez's interview. He said that when he was at the Department of Justice, I think it was in the Civil Rights Division,
right,
he was facing down this Handel lady who was Secretary of
State.
State.
Oh, sure, yeah. She's a party hack, and she was Secretary of State, which is like a thing that when elections are monitored by international observers, one of the things you can't have is party hacks overseeing the machinery and the mechanics of the elections, and that is exactly what we have in the United States. So yeah, Karen Handel, as Secretary of State, was overseeing the
election law,
suppressing votes in Georgia. So he's also right about that. The first question that I saw in the last chat was, why did establishment Democrats spend $8 million when they could have spent it in so many other ways? And if they did that, that probably would be stupid. But there are actually two premises there that are wrong. One is that establishment Democrats spent the money. They didn't. This was money that came in from people around the country who chipped in $5, $10, $15, $20 because they're so fired up and looking for anything to do in the Trump era that they hope can make some sort of difference. So this was $8-9 million that didn't come from big corporate donors that went to the DCCC or the DNC that then went down to Georgia. It was money that was sent directly from random people around the country who frustrated about Trump, who wanted to send a message by winning this seat that Trump's agenda needed to be rolled back. The second premise that I would quibble with in that question is that the money could have been spent elsewhere. What these people would have done with their $5 and $10 and $15 if it wasn't sent to Ossoff isn't clear. They may have gotten another latte. It's not necessarily the case that you can go to this person who was moved to give $10 to Ossoff and say, well, you know what, instead of spending it on this person down in suburban Atlanta, why don't you spend it on a voter registration effort in Ohio? Or why don't you spend it on a voter protection unit in Michigan? Or why don't you send it to XYZ? Maybe you could sway some people of doing that, but that takes an entire another effort. So it's not as if there was one entity, establishment Democrats, that decided to send money to Atlanta when they could have sent it somewhere else. So in some ways, this was something that got away from the party, which has kind of left Ossoff in an interesting position because people look at James Thompson, Bernie-backed guy in Kansas. They look at Rob Quist, Bernie-backed guy in Montana, and say, well, the DCCC and DNC aren't helping them. They are helping Ossoff, so that means Ossoff must be some type of neoliberal squish. He may be, but actually the DNC and DCCC intended to help all three of them the same, which was zilch.
Harriet Thomas Ivy says 38% of voters in November voted for the guy who had the D next to his name, and he did not run a single ad. The Democratic Party has had its head up its ass.
Yes, certainly the Democratic Party has. First, two things. 38 to 49 is a big move. Like in politics, you very rarely see that. Yes, Ossoff had a lot of money, and the last guy didn't, and nobody had ever heard of him. So certainly that accounts for some of it. But you also have to take into account presidential versus special versus midterm cycles. There are a lot of structural and cultural reasons that Republicans get out to vote all the time and Democrats don't. I talked to a couple Republicans yesterday, and I asked them, are you are you gonna vote for, let's say Karen Handel wins and she wasn't your candidate, are you gonna vote for her in June? And the woman's like, look, I voted in every, she's 50, she's like, I voted in every election since I was 18. I'm going to vote, and I'm going to vote for the Republican. And that there is an attitude among a lot of Republican voters that it is election day. I don't care how badly I am feeling right now about the party. I am going to go out and vote. And Republicans tend to have a lot more flexibility in their professional lives, and so are able, and they have more means, and so it's just also easier for them to do it. But there's also something cultural that they just do it. It's ingrained in them from the time that they're young children that this is a thing that you do. You vote for the Republican, and if you don't, you have betrayed your country. And so that is the thing that has Democrats most scared about June, is that they're just going to come out. And this one woman, Jen Cox, from a group that she started called Pave It Blue, she said, you can't make votes. And so it's kind of a profound thought. Like, you can knock on as many doors as you want. You can make all the phone calls you want. You cannot invent people that do not exist. You can turn out everybody that you've got, but you can't make new ones. So there might be some type of a ceiling there.
The term identity politics is always basically said with a sneer, and what they're referring to is other than white identity politics.
Right.
But what you're really talking about in the South with regard to
Identity politics is very strong in the South, and particularly in regions like this, because a lot of white Republican voters in suburban Atlanta either consciously or subconsciously associate Democrat with black, and with the black leadership in Atlanta, which they believe deep in their hearts is corrupt, and they have believed since Reconstruction, that they should not be in power in Atlanta, and so as whites fled out of Atlanta in the 60s, and created these endless suburbs, you created this, or you didn't create it, but this racial tension deepened. And so you do have this strong identity politics, where in the South, and particularly in a district like this one, the people in the Republican Party are, this is a very white party, and it is heavily male, but not at all exclusively male.